Deep in the mountains, the boy ate everything he could find, including insects, snails, mice, snakes, and rabbits, which he butchered with a knife and cooked before eating. Have to eat anything to stave off hunger. He looked like a specially trained soldier, but he was just an ordinary boy, only 13 years old. What would you do if you were abandoned alone in the mountains with no electricity or running water? Will you be able to survive? This video tells the story of a man who has been surviving alone for 43 years. From the age of 13, living in different mountains and rivers. This is not a story from long ago, but a true story from modern Japan. How did he survive? Why did he continue living like that? Please watch his amazing life to the end. This man, Kazuma Kimura, was born as the fourth son of 8 siblings. From the time he ran away from home at age 13 until he was discovered at age 57. He had avoided human society and lived in remote caves and forests for 43 years. He survived by hunting animals and gathering wild plants. In 2004, his life story, The Caveman, became a bestseller and was adapted into a TV drama, bringing him to public attention. This video will be based on the contents of his book, The Caveman. The reason he suddenly ran away from home was due to his home and school life. His father worked as a handyman, repairing ironwork and roofs for farms, and his mother worked in a nearby factory. Even so, the Kimura family, with 8 children, was so poor that they could not even afford to eat properly. Growing up, he was hungry and always snacked. He would steal his brother's side dishes or eat the viper his father had carefully dried. And when his father found out he was eating, he would get angry, yell at him, hit him with a wooden stick, and even hang him from a tree. His mother was just as unforgiving to him as his father. He was often ostracized by his friends at school for being smelly and dirty. He was upset about being mocked, so he went to fight with a large group of people. But because he didn't eat well and was small, he was always left covered in blood. Thus, with no place for himself either at school or at home, he would often skip school and satisfy his hunger by catching wild vegetables and fish in the mountains and rivers. However, when he returned home, he was scolded for everything and would be beaten repeatedly for snacking. His anger and frustration towards his parents reached a peak, and one morning he finally decided to leave home. He waited until his parents and siblings were out, packed as much food as he could into his bag, grabbed some matches, a large shovel, and ran out of the house. He walked endlessly along the railroad tracks, stepping aside when a train passed and then starting again when it passed. When he got hungry, he picked a persimmon and ate it, and when he got tired, he took a short nap beside the railroad tracks. At the time, he thought he would rather die than go home. On the second day after leaving the house, he was feeling tired and sleepy, and his head was foggy when he heard a dog barking in the distance. It was a voice that sounded very familiar. He turned around and saw a white dog running towards him. It was Shiro, a pet he had at home. Shiro, that was closest to him, followed him all the way. He was happy and decided to live with Shiro with tears in his eyes. He then continued on his way, heading towards a cave that was famous in the area. And finally he got there. He went further in and found a secluded cave, which he decided to make his home. First, he prepared a place to live. He built a sleeping area away from the entrance to the cave and made a partition out of sticks and dead grass to keep out the wind and animals. After a month, the potatoes he had brought from home ran out, and he had to look for food. This was a remote mountain area, and to stave off hunger, he had to cook and eat whatever he could find in the mountains. Wild plants, insects, snails, mice, bats, birds, snakes, frogs, rabbits, and even wild boars and deer, some creatures you would never expect to see. However, he can't survive without eating whatever he can get his hands on. Prey is not always available in the mountains. Sometimes he would run for 3 days and catch nothing. He seasoned the food with salt and soy sauce that he had brought from home. To get drinking water, he dug holes in a tree with a knife and placed a tube underneath it to store the water. Kimura Boy's method of catching prey was outstanding. For example, Birds were caught in traps made from tree branches. He discovered that the rabbit was entering and exiting through two holes. So he stuck a branch through one hole to immobilize it, and then caught it through the other hole. Catching a wild boar was a life-threatening task. He dug a hole and stuck 3 sharpened spears in it. He then acted as a decoy to lure the boar out, and pretending to run away from the boar as it charged at him, he would jump over the trap. The boar would fall right into the hole. He was also very skilled at butchering animals. He would remove the innards, cut out the meat to eat, and the skin to make clothes and shoes, and dry the remaining meat to preserve it. How did this 13-year-old boy have such survival skills? The answer was his past experience. His knowledge of catching and eating mountain creatures came from watching his father. He learned skills like how to make traps himself when he skipped school and hunted for food in the mountains and rivers. One day, the Kimura boy developed a fever. Perhaps he was tired from his long escape and the unfamiliar life in the mountains. He was dizzy with fever and could not get up. He lay there half-conscious. Shiro then put a wet cloth in his mouth and placed it on the boy's forehead. Could something like this really happen? Shiro was an incredibly intelligent and kind-hearted dog and loved the Kimura boy. The next day, the boy's condition had improved a little. When he looked up, he saw an earthworm at the root of the tree. It was about 20 centimeters long. In the Kimura household, if someone had a fever, they would feed them roasted earthworms. Remembering this, he roasted the earthworms, boiled water in an empty can he found, and put the earthworms in it to drink. Apparently, the smell was awful, but after drinking it, the high fever quickly subsided. The Kimura boy and Shiro lived together like this, but their happy days suddenly came to an end. One day, Shiro seemed to be feeling a bit down and weak. Worried, he stroked him and tried to give him some dried meat, but Shiro refused to eat it. He then noticed that Shiro had become very cold. It was a sudden and unexpected event. He stayed close to Shiro for 3 days without eating anything, hoping that Shiro was just sleeping and would wake up. But Shiro never opened his eyes. The Kimura boy cries echoed forever inside the cave. Then he picked up Shiro and buried him in a place where pink flowers were blooming. During his time as a hunter-gatherer in the mountains, he came into contact with humans. While he was in a cave, an old couple called out to him. At the time, he was wearing boar skins wrapped around his body and shoes made from boar skin. The couple was so shocked by the caveman-like appearance that they were left speechless. He received some rice balls from the husband. It was the first time he had ever seen anything like it. He was so moved that tears began to flow. A pickled plum inside the rice. The old couple invited the Kamwa boy to stay at their house. The meal they prepared for him was warm rice, grilled meat, vegetables, and miso soup, typical home-cooked food. But it was the first luxurious meal he had ever had. When he was allowed to take a bath for the first time in several years, the Kimura boy asked if it was okay to get dirty. But the husband told him it was fine and not to worry about it. When it was time to go to bed, he was surprised and impressed to sleep on a futon that smelled like soap for the first time. He was so happy that they had done that for him that he couldn't do it that night. In fact, the couple had lost a son during the Pacific War, so they asked Kimura if he would like to live as their child. He began to think that he shouldn't depend on them forever, that if he stayed there too long, he would be a burden to the couple. Even though he was touched by people's kindness, he was ultimately unable to fit into human society. Maybe the experience of being bullied as a child was traumatic. He bowed to them repeatedly, thanked them, and returned to the mountain. Returning to mountain life, he began to question the value of his life and the meaning of it all. What am I doing? Why am I alive? When I'm in the mountains, I'm afraid of animals. When I'm around people, I'm worried about what other people think. Since I lost Shiro, I have no one to talk to. Every day, I just think about how I'm going to make a living. Before I knew it, I had forgotten how to laugh. Is life worth living? Isn't there no point in living any longer? He had heard that he could end his life by entering the sea of trees. So he got a truck driver to give him a ride partway to the Sea of Trees at the foot of Mount Fuji. how long he had been wandering through the forest, when suddenly he looked up at the top of a tree and saw a rope hanging down. On the ground were a woman's handbag, shoes, and tattered clothes, along with bones scattered nearby. And then the skull rolled. Her hair was caught in the tree, swaying in the wind. He was so sick he couldn't move. He wondered what kind of pain this woman had gone through, and if she had come here to find relief. But now her body was torn to pieces. He felt so sorry for her that he couldn't stop crying. A few more nights later, he finds a man hanging from a tree, still wearing his jumper. Perhaps this man had suffered a painful experience that could have led to his death. He cut the rope around the man's neck, gently lowered his body to the ground, and clasped his hands together. At that moment, the Kimura boy truly felt the fear of death. Many more years passed before the incident finally occurred that made him known to the public. In fact, you could even say he caused it himself. He was 57 years old at the time. The Kimura boy made a living by fishing in the river, but one day, heavy rains made the river muddy and he could no longer catch fish. He suddenly remembered a vending machine in a nearby factory. When he saw the vending machine being refilled, he noticed a box full of coins. So he grabbed a metal fitting and tried to pry the vending machine open, but was caught by the security guard and handed over to the police. Police investigation finally revealed his 43-year survival story. The police officers who were investigating him were shocked, but they weren't the only ones who were surprised. Soon the media picked up on the case and his existence became known to the world. And a book about his life, Uncle Cave, was published. He eventually ended up living in a residential facility for the mentally disabled. He is still in charge of various tasks at the facility. An employee there said, "He used to be a suspicious man with a stern look in his eyes, who kept people away, but his life at the facility made him a gentler person." It seems that after going through many hardships, the Kimura boy has finally found a place to settle in human society. He also taught classes to children on various survival skills. He then talked about his life in the mountains. Looking back, my fondest memory is living in the cave with Shiro. It seems like just the other day that I was chasing wild boars and rabbits with Shiro. I was able to become strong thanks to the brave Shiro. But now, thanks to the care of many people, I live with a warm heart. I try to work hard for myself and for others. Looks like I'll have to put off seeing you for a while.